Welcome to Real Clear Politics for Friday, October 31st. It's Halloween. I'm Andrew Wallenworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, before we start, I want to remind our viewers and listeners of a little housekeeping. It is exciting news. And that is that starting next Wednesday, November 5th, Real Clear Politics is moving to a new time slot and a new channel on the radio. We will be carried on the brand new Megyn Kelly channel on SiriusXM. It's channel 111, and we will be on at 11 a.m. Eastern Time live, so 5 days a week. And that's leading into Megyn's show, which begins at noon. So it's easy to remember. It's channel 111 at 11 Eastern. We'll still be on YouTube and the podcast apps just like now. So that isn't changing. And we'll be still working with the same great team here at SiriusXM that we've been up till now. So we're grateful for that. Tom, anything you want to add to the news?
No, we're excited. I mean, it's kicking off next week. And as you said, easy to remember, 111 at 11.
Yeah.
So,
Carl?
Hope everybody tunes in.
Yeah, I have a little housekeeping news. Tomorrow, my brother Jackson Cannon, famous Boston bartender and a loyal listener to the show, turns 60. Happy birthday, Jack. The World Series resumes tonight. Admiral Yamamoto is pitching for the Dodgers. That's not really his name, but he's such a steely he reminds me of the samurai admiral from World War II. And of course, it's the Breeders' Cup weekend. So there's a lot going on in our lives.
Okay, well, good. Let's dive into some other news, including Donald Trump's statement. He's back from Asia. He's not taking much of a rest. He put out a post last night where he says in all caps, but I'm not going to shout it, but the quote is here: "Because of the fact that the Democrats have gone stone cold crazy, the choice is clear. Initiate the nuclear option, get rid of the filibuster, and make America great again." So just to remind folks, the filibuster is the Senate rule that requires 60 votes to overcome objections. And since the Republicans only have 53-seat majority right now, the Democrats are able to stop things like opening the government. So, Tom, lots of folks on both sides of the aisle have been calling for the president to get involved in the shutdown debate. But is this what they had in mind?
Not like this. Listen, so 8 days ago, Richard Porter, who's a contributor to Real Clear Politics, wrote, and we had him on this show discussing the fact that to nuke the filibuster would be a huge, huge mistake on the part of Republicans, and that it's basically what the Democrats, it's what they want. It's almost like that's been their plan from the beginning, that they're doing this to sort of bait Republicans into doing away with the filibuster. And then, of course, the next time they're in power with 51 seats in the Senate, they can jam through all of these things, make D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, pack the Supreme Court, do whatever they want. And so that article was, I think, received and well received by, members of folks on the Hill. And there was signs that, a lot of Republican senators do not want to. And by the way, let's remember, Trump called for this in his first term and was met with total resistance from Republicans on that. And they've stayed pretty consistent. So, some people said, oh, this is just, Trump using a negotiating tool, threatening this, although
it's the dumbest thing he could have done.
Well,
here's the public opinion has they're finally starting to turn. I know the polls don't quite show that yet, but you had this, the Democrats caused this shutdown. They did this. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. They voted to shut the government down. Then they turned around and said, Republicans shut the government down. All the Democrats and MSNBC believe that. The journalists are starting to say, well, wait a minute. Greta Bronner of C-SPAN, who's the most objective journalist in America, corrected a Democratic congressman on the air the other day, and she shouted back to Congress, well, I don't accept your narrative. I mean,
the government employees union.
Yes, that's right. The government employees union. Another union yesterday, who was it? Was it, I forget, it was Teamsters. Who was it called? The head of the airlines, the airline union. Everybody's starting.
Delta came out with a statement. Everybody's coming out with statements now saying.
And this is so the Democrats, they milked this strategy for 30 days, shut down the government, blame the Republicans for it. The ice was finally starting to crack, and people were starting to realize this was just not right. Meanwhile, Republicans, independents don't like this, but Republicans are popular. They've already gone up in popularity, Republican House members. And you got to assume more so in their own districts. So Trump weighs in at the exactly wrong time, right as the Democrats were about to have to cry uncle, and hands them a lifeline with something that, as Tom pointed out, would just bite them in the butt in 2 years or 4 years, whenever they next lose the Senate. It was credible miscalculation, in my humble opinion.
Well, I don't know if it does all that. I mean, John Thune has said that he's not going to change his position on this. And I don't really get the sense, Carl, that
yeah, but Andy,
just
don't you
because the
see what
president
that?
asks
Don't you
for
see
this,
what that
the
did?
Senate's
But that, so now the Republicans are shutting down the government. The people are going to hear it that way. Thune is saying no to the president. He completely upset the dynamic of it. The Republicans had a storyline, and it was consistent, and it had the advantage of being true. Now Trump muddled it.
Tom, you see it that way?
I don't know. I mean, maybe he muddled it a little bit. I mean, if you're saying now, well, it's up to Republicans to nuke the filibuster, and it's incumbent upon them to do away with the legislative filibuster so that they can reopen the government with 53 votes. Democrats are still the ones that are keeping the government closed, and I think that's something that Republicans will continue to point out. And so I'm not sure how much Trump's post, I was going to say tweet, but his post on True Social, it's getting a lot of news, obviously, and it's being covered widely, but I'm not sure how much it fundamentally changes the dynamics of what's going on in Washington.
And
Andy,
beyond
Andy,
this,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, well, my
a
question
point
was
of order, though. Is it a tweet still? Twitter's gone, but when you type something on X,
the post.
Yeah, it seems sort of generic. I think tweet still, because a post can be anything.
I know I like tweet, but
yeah, thank you, Andy.
But that wasn't what my question was.
I'm sorry.
My question was going to be, stepping back from the political moment. Getting rid of the filibuster would be a huge, huge change. And senators on both sides, it's sort of an institutional point of view, are against it, because if you did get rid of it, then there would be sort of, Katie bar the door. Anyone with a 51-seat majority could get anything done in the Senate. And we like the Senate.
Which is how it was done for a long time before the filibuster was implemented and instituted, correct?
Okay. Yes, but for those of us,
well, I don't know about that.
There are those of us who think government gridlock is a good thing. That we think anything that could slow down this government is the legislative process is probably a positive, because we don't want these guys and ladies doing too much. We want them out of our lives. So gridlock is good, and from that point of view, getting rid of the
why not make it the supermajority then, Andy? Why is it 60? Why couldn't it be 67 or 70 or 80?
It was 60.
It was starting to sound about right.
It was Tom, it was
you literally want nothing to get done in the Senate.
Tom, it was 2/3 for a long time. 60 was the compromise. And Andy is harking back to an ancient wisdom. No man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. And
maybe the new compromise should be 55.
Well, he doesn't really mean gridlock. He means deliberate. It's supposed to be a deliberative body. I have this theory. You can't prove it by the polls, and the political scientists want to beat me with a rubber hose when I say it. But I think voters like divided government. I think they've, especially now when these two parties have seemingly lost their collective minds.
Well, Andy does.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of divided government. I think of it as like the Three Stooges, like when one's got the clamp on the guy's nose, and the other one's, three bodies just in total gridlock is my idea of probably the perfect way to run the federal government, and then let the states do it. That's my view. Anyway, this weekend is supposed to be sort of this big weekend, because the SNAP payments start to run out, and the ACA enrollment is this weekend. People are going to see their healthcare premiums go up. Tom, is that what we've been waiting for in order to sort of break this gridlock?
Maybe. I mean, look, people thought, well, it was going to be when the troops stopped getting paid on October 15th. Well, that's in the rearview mirror now. But this does seem the conversation around SNAP and the conversation around the ACA stuff has been a little bit more intense and seemed to have a little bit more bearing on the discussion that's going on in Washington. So I suspect that this thing is going to end sooner rather than later. I initially said I thought it'd be Halloween. Well, it's Halloween and the Senate's adjourned for the weekend, so it ain't happening now. I think the longest shutdown's 35 days. That's next week, middle of next week. And so I suspect right around that time is maybe when something will get done. I do not foresee the Republicans doing away with the filibuster to end this thing. But I think there will be compromise that comes out of this that will end the shutdown sometime late next week.
Bold prediction.
Bold prediction.
Well, you and Tom both, you've written pieces for me. I've edited you. It didn't take. We don't use acronyms on this show. Let's call them SNAP. Let's call it food stamps. The ACA, for those of you, if you're happy to be listening to us for the first time, is you can call it Obamacare. You can call it the Affordable Care Act.
Or you can call it the ACA, but go ahead.
Or you can, like Andy, call it the ACA. There's a point that Republicans haven't made enough, and some conservative types have made it on X and there have been a few op-eds, but Obamacare was not supposed to raise your premiums so greatly that the government had to subsidize it. That was one of those promises. It was supposed to be less costly. It was squeeze out the middleman. You were supposed to be able to keep your doctor and your plan and all that happy stuff.
None of which was true.
None of which was true. But this idea that you have this plan and you're telling people, first of all, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, there's widespread waste in the system. There's something like 12 million people who signed up, who get the subsidies, but never went to a doctor. And so we don't know the insurance companies getting the money or those people signed up, but then didn't got another plan. I mean, the system really needs to be looked at carefully. And I'm not saying the Republican big, beautiful bill did all that, but it squeezed some of this waste out. And the Democrats want all the funding back, and they don't even know where all the funding's going. But having said all that, there are people who've come to rely on the subsidy to get their health care. And I don't know how many people it is, but you've seen some of these feature stories in the mainstream press, and some of these people are very worried. Should that be pressuring Democrats to end their shutdown? You'd think it would, but it hasn't yet. And the people who've been asked about it have either just stuck to the talking point being the Republicans have three branches of government, they have to figure it out, or every once in a while, one or two of these people will admit it, say, yeah, well, there's going to be some pain, but that's how we get what we want.
Yeah. And
I think that pain, if it's felt, and all the people who get food stamps aren't Democratic voters. Many of them voted for President Trump, but whoever they are, this is going to be a real hardship for them. And they're going to have to figure out how, are they going to go without health care? Are they going to go without food stamps? And what are they going to do with these when these programs run out?
So are you going to venture a prediction on when this thing comes to an end, as Tom bravely did?
Well, does it seem to you that they want to break the 35-day record? Because
yes,
right, then it'll be late next week. If they don't want to break the record, it'll be early next week. It's hard for me to know what these birds are even thinking at this point.
I think it's sometime after Tuesday's election.
Okay.
But before the end of the week. That's my prediction. Tom, I'll go out on a limb with you. How's that?
I feel very confident that although they say the internet lives forever, that, we'll be able to move on if we're wrong. Nobody's gonna pull that clip and play it.
Well, you notice how I hedged.
You hedged, right? Okay. Well, guys, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the elections next Tuesday. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevin, and we'll be back with more right after this. Guys, it is the last weekend of campaigning in New Jersey, Virginia, and in New York. So, Tom, bring us up to date. What are the polls saying about these three races?
Well, Mamdani still has a double-digit lead in New York City, and there have been 20 polls that have been taken since the middle of July. He's led by double digits in every single one of them. And the last, I think, 6 polls that have been taken just in the last week all show him with a comfortable lead. So may have tightened just a tiny bit, but he is still the overwhelming favorite. Unless all these polls are wrong, this would probably be the biggest poll miss in history if he somehow manages to lose this race. In New Jersey, a lot closer. Cheryl's lead there is down to low single digits, and right around. Chitterelli lost that race by about 3 points last time, and he's right about there this time around. Although, again, you would think in this environment with the Republicans holding the White House, the Senate, and Congress, and the House, that this would be a cakewalk for Democrats. And the fact that this is a nail biter, I think, is troublesome for them. I don't know. He's definitely within the range of an upset. And so we'll see what happens there on Tuesday. And then Virginia, look, Spanberger seems to have survived, at least as far as the polls say. She hasn't really suffered that much. Jay Jones has suffered a lot. He went from leading in every poll to being behind in every poll that's been taken. And there have been a lot of polls taken in this race because of those text messages that came out, and everyone was trying to understand how it was going to affect the race. Well, it hurt him a lot, but it hasn't hurt Spanberger that much. And so she's still comfortably ahead by high single digits, and I think is headed for victory on Tuesday. Again, unless all of the polls that we've seen are wrong. Winsome Sears has not led in a single poll in this race. And so, if she manages somehow to win it on Tuesday, that would be also a massive failure of the polls.
Carl, I'm curious. I want your view on this. So Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, they're kind of cut from the same cloth. I mean, they were sort of relative moderates within the party, both military backgrounds. And it seems to me that in both cases, they're kind of limping to the finish line here. What does it say about the Democratic Party? And does it say that you just contrast what's happening in New York with what's happening in these two other states, and it doesn't look like the energy is with the moderate wing of the Democratic
misogyny,
Party.
Andy, don't you know?
I forgot to mention they're both women. Yes, thank you.
That was on MSNBC. They were lamenting Spanberger hadn't caught fire. She wasn't leading by enough, and they said, yeah, well, other countries don't have problems electing women governors. They went on for a while in that vein. Winsome Sears put out a tweet, and she said, should someone tell them? Because Virginia's
She's a woman too.
Yeah, Virginia's gonna have its first woman governor, no matter who wins. It looks like it's gonna be Spanberger. To your point, Andy, I don't know if you can read too much into the state of the Democratic Party on this race. She's run a exceedingly cautious campaign. There's that during their debate, Sears turned and looked at her and said, really, pressed her on this, women going into boys' bathrooms and including a sex criminal, and Spanberger, and on Jay Johns, wishing his opponents, a Republican, perfectly moderate Republican, that his children would die in front of their mother. And she looked, and Spanberger wouldn't look at her. She wouldn't address it. She's played rope-a-dope, and she's been comfortably ahead. So she's run a safe campaign. If she was upset, we'd all say, okay, she blew it. But the polls don't show that she's going to be upset. So I wouldn't read too much into the energy of the party. She's doing fine. And the other thing is, if Tom points out that the Attorney General's race, Miaris now looks ahead, you're going to have what we don't normally find anymore, which is ticket splitters. You're going to have people in Virginia, if these polls are right, who go in and vote for Spanberger for governor and for Miaris as Attorney General, a conservative Republican,
or don't vote for that,
or only vote the top of the ticket. And we'll be able to know. We'll see the vote totals, but that's actually reassuring that campaigns matter and that what candidates say matters, instead of it's just the D or just the R in front of their name.
Tom, I guess we can do more sort of autopsy next week, but at this point, to my question, I mean, does this tell us anything about the Republican Democratic Party now, and anything about the midterms?
As I said earlier, look, these races probably should be easy wins for Democrats. New Jersey has shifted to the right a little bit in recent cycles. It shifted to Trump a little bit in 2024, but history has shown that the party that's out of power usually performs very well in these elections and wins overwhelmingly. And so the fact that both of these races are nail biters, again, Virginia's sort of a unique case because of Jay Jones and what he tweeted there. But New Jersey's a little bit of a different. I'd be slightly worried if I was a Democrat about what's going on in New Jersey. And then, New York is New York, and clearly Mamdani has the energy of the party and the base behind him. And as I've said before, New York's going to get the mayor they deserve, just like we have the mayor we deserve here in Chicago.
There's an interesting thing about New York, though, Andy. There was this debate the other night in the district attorney's office, and Alvin Bragg is running for re-election, and the rap on him, the complaint of his opponents, there's two of them, is that he's soft on crime, to use an old phrase. And in his case, he's sort of boasted about it, that he doesn't even really seem to believe in incarceration. And it's a new kind of phenomenon that's coming on the 21st century, prosecutors who don't like to prosecute. But he never mentioned his most famous prosecution, the prosecution of Donald Trump on that flimsy charge that resulted in 34 felony convictions. And I think he's going to win. I don't think that thing hurt him. It probably helped him in New York. But institutionally, the Democrats, I think, are not bragging about lawfare the way they were before. I don't think they think it's a winner. So that's a subtle thing, and it may not affect the outcome of that race. But if you're looking for, what this election is going to tell us Tuesday night, maybe the Democrats, now that they're on
the Republican didn't mention it either, Carl.
Well, that's because Trump's so unpopular. But my point is that Bragg's not bragging about it,
and he had been bragging about it for a long time, and suddenly it's down the memory hole.
Yeah, but I don't know what to think of that, except to think that maybe now that they're on the receiving end of lawfare from the Trump administration, the Democrats have sort of realized that they went too far on that. But I don't know.
Yeah, so we have a piece today on the front page of RCP by Byron York on this very topic, which I commend to people if they want to see some more background on it. And it is interesting, Carl, and I'm wondering whether that is the right conclusion, that just because it's not being brought up right now, as the Democrats are sort of being subjected to lawfare, do you really think that they've learned their lesson and that they were going to stop? I mean, is that what we should conclude for this? Or are they just going to, lay in abeyance until they're reelected and we're back to lawfare as per usual?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Some Eric Swalwell and some other people have promised to double down and do more lawfare. So good point, Andy. I don't know for sure. And I'll give you a little teaser. You'll get a clue as to what some of the Democrats are thinking when we come to the "You Cannot Be Serious" portion of our program. I've got one.
So, Tom, do you think that? I mean, that was the question I had coming out of this Alvin Bragg episode. Is that, gee, I mean, are they ignoring it just because they lost? Are they ignoring it because they fear that lawfare is coming for them? I mean, if I'm Alvin Bragg, I'm looking at my mortgage papers pretty carefully right now.
Right. No, I don't think it's out of fear. I think it's not going to help him in the campaign. And that's why the Republican didn't mention it either. I don't think, he was bragging about it up until the point where, it was tossed out but I don't think Democrats, I don't think they've walked back any of this stuff. I mean, I don't think they think that their lawfare, while it wasn't successful, I don't know that the lesson they took away from that is, oh, well, we can't, we're never going to do that again because that was, that didn't work. I think this is the new normal for us on both sides now, which is, and as we've talked about before, it's unfortunate. It's not great for the country, but we've been on this slippery slope for some time where we are criminalizing politics and weaponizing the legal system against politicians for doing many times largely political things. And so I suspect we'll see more of this next year, and certainly in 2026 and definitely in 2028.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Waldworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, and we're joined now by Charles Murray. He is the author of Losing Ground, Coming Apart, books like that. And he's also the co-author of The Bell Curve, but he has a new book out now called Taking Religion Seriously. So, Charles, welcome to the program.
I'm delighted to be here.
So I think it's fair to say that this book is a departure for you and that you're best known for your work in political science, but the title tells us a bit about what you've been thinking about lately. So let's start there. Were you always interested in religion, and why are you taking it seriously now?
Because Nick Eberstadt told me to. Actually, what happened is that Nick Eberstadt, a colleague at AEI, had been interviewing me, and somehow we got on to religion. And I was describing my kind of eccentric, haphazard journey. And at the end of it, he said, that ought to be your next book. And I decided, yeah, that would be fun, but also because I am typical of tens of millions of people. We are well educated, we're successful professionally, and religion hasn't been an important part of our lives. And that was true of me from the time I went to college to 20 years ago. And subsequently, I have had as I say, very haphazard change in my view of God in general and Christianity in particular. And I had to do it not by spiritual revelation, but by more indirect means. And I thought, well, this is a story worth telling. Uh, just to tell other people it can be done, and it's worthwhile.
Charles, you're too modest to say what I'm about to say, but in your book you write that maybe God needed a way to reach overeducated agnostics like me. And I read that and I thought, so Charles is a vessel. Charles is doing the Lord's work. Charles has been called.
Well, I think it was more for my benefit than the Lord's that I stumbled into this. I didn't actually stumble into it. This whole book is brought about because of my wife, who had exactly the same experience going to college that I did. We learned smart people don't believe that stuff anymore. And then we had our first daughter, and my wife said to me, in what's since become a fairly well-known line, I love her far more than evolution requires. Great line. David Brooks has used it publicly, so did Michael Gerson. And she felt like she was a conduit for some greater love coming from somewhere else. And that led her into eventually Quakerism. And over a long period of time, I was watching her and I was saying, gee, I kind of envy her. I wish I could participate in this. And slowly but surely, I got nudged along an investigation where I could use the tools that I'm good at to explore religion. I'm not good at spiritual perception. If you scored spiritual perception the same way we score IQ, I would be at 75. Okay. My wife's at 130. I'm at 75. I've got to use other means.
Charles, so I bumped into you out at the Hoover Institution last week. We were there for a conference celebrating Thomas Sowell, and I came up to you and said, so I'm on my own little faith journey that I'm going through, and I saw an excerpt that was published of your book, and I thought, I have to read this book. And I got to tell you, it is a great read, and it's only 156 pages long or something. It's really easy to go through. And it's also got in there, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of reading on religion, and you put in there the books that you've read. So, and you repeatedly say to people, look, don't take my word for it. Go read these things yourself, make your own decisions. But one of the things that you grapple with early in the book and then at the end of the book is this idea of moral law. Tell our listeners a little bit more about that and why you think that's key to sort of understanding or at least taking religion seriously.
I'm instructed in all this by C.S. Lewis. I mean, like so many others, I read Mere Christianity in around 2005 and was blown away by it. But Lewis starts it out by saying, you know what? There is an understanding in human beings of decent behavior that cuts across cultures. And I was very resistant to that at first. But the more he explained it, the more I said, yeah. And then he says, and you can't explain this through evolution. And he understood evolution, and he talks in ways which will speak to people who say evolution can explain our moral standards. And he's pretty good at talking you out of that. And I finally bought into it, which is, it said, there is a moral standard which is a part of the core of being human, and it involves a lot of altruism and what the Greeks called agape, a selfless love. And I believe that this is as close to an understanding of what God intends as I'm likely to come.
Charles, you remind me of something. There was an exchange. I happened to be at it between Francis Collins before he was famous and Christopher Hitchens when Hitch was the most famous atheist in the world. And he was asked, the question came, is there anything that gives you pause in your commitment to atheism? And Hitch said this idea, what you're talking about now, this idea that human beings, there's nothing that explains wanting to be moral, wanting to be a good Samaritan, wanting to do this in terms of self-interest. it seems this universal thing. And Collins was saying it comes from God, and Hitchens said, I'm paraphrasing, but it's the one thing he didn't have an answer for.
Yes, and by the way, when I credited C.S. Lewis, Francis Collins expresses the same thought very eloquently in the language of God, and he also expresses it very eloquently in person. And I also heard secondhand that Francis Collins is a Christian that Christopher Hitchens respected.
They became friends after that
Yeah,
exchange.
yeah.
Charles, I came across your writings back, gosh, in the 80s with Losing Ground, I guess. And you and I met at AEI when I was working with Ben Wattenberg, who was one of the great data journalists of the time, and sort of looked at big sets of data in order to draw conclusions. Your work does largely the same. And this is from a review from Barton Swaim in the Wall Street Journal. And I thought it struck me about your writing. He said, you often sense that the writer, you, would rather draw different conclusions, but in view of the evidence cannot. And I'm wondering if that's true in this book, because you come to this book not in this topic, not as a man of faith, I guess, initially, nor as someone who studied religion, but as someone who studies sociology and data and government statistics. I mean, how did that inform the way you went about writing this?
It was central to it, all right. So that since I can't enter into the kind of spiritual understandings that my wife can, I can do things like look at the physics of the Big Bang. I can do things that look at the historicity of the Gospels. And when you mentioned that I sometimes sound like I'm reaching conclusions that I'd rather not, sometimes there are more practical reasons for that. For example, in the Wall Street Journal, I did a column that comes from the book about terminal lucidity, a phenomenon whereby people with advanced dementia will come back for a few hours before their death, and suggested that this is evidence that consciousness can exist independently of the brain. Well, I knew if I go into print with that, I am going to lose the respect of a lot of people whose respect I want. Steve Pinker being among them, who wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal after that, dismissing my whole argument. And in a way, yes, I resisted both concluding that because I'm a child of the Enlightenment, and I always took for granted that consciousness cannot survive death, cannot survive the brain stopping, and also because I have been unpopular in many circles before, and I kind of hate to lose one of the few remaining circles of people that I get along with. So I was resistant in that sense too.
You know, Charles, it reminds me a little bit of the Alpha Course. I don't know if you know this. Nicky Gumbel made it famous in English. He started out as a lawyer, became a Christian, and then became an evangelical pastor. But the Alpha Course begins with very factual approach to it. Jesus of Nazareth lived. Here's the evidence that he lived. And it kind of walks you through the things. And at the end of the first course, he said, all right, so Jesus lived. He did these things. All right, now we're going to explore whether he was divine. But it was a factual establishment that was, we're empiricists. I grew up born and raised in the news business. I mean, the pastor who baptized me was a Congregationalist minister and officiated at my wedding. He majored in chemistry at Harvard. So he was so this cerebral approach as a gateway drug, if you will, for people like you and I who are raised to deal in facts and test facts. I think a lot of people originally come to faith that way. Then they have to then there's another step involved. But I think there are a lot of people who did what you did.
Well, and the reason I wrote the book is I think there are a lot more that could, and they don't realize how much is out there. Something like the historicity of the Gospels. You have had the revisionists who've tried to tell us that you can't even be sure there was anybody named Jesus, and if he did, he hasn't said anything that's been transmitted accurately. Well, there is a very substantial body of rigorous work that says otherwise that I find persuasive. So in this case, I was balancing a traditional interpretation of the Gospels against a modern interpretation, revisionist interpretation, and I'm saying the old guys, the old-fashioned guys, have more going on their side than the revisionists have on their side.
Charles, I know we're running late on time, but I want to ask you about this. And you talk about the Big Bang, and then you talk about how in the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years that quantum physics has sort of prompted this sort of reevaluation. And you said, you write in here that, we have to accept that the chance of our universe permitting life is trillions to one. And then you said, perhaps the existence of life is a byproduct of God's intention, and we have no idea what that intention might be. But accepting that we live in an intentional universe is tantamount to acknowledging the existence of a God for whom the concept of intention applies. That's a huge departure from both atheism and agnosticism. That may not be your reaction, but if not, why not? I thought that was great. Really challenging readers to do, think hard on these issues and these subjects.
Well, you've got three choices in this case. You can believe that we're lucked into a 1 in a trillion chance. You can believe there are multiverses out there and there are a million universes, or you can believe that there's intention. And as I say, what's parsimonious, what's plausible, I say the third of those alternatives is, to me, much more plausible than the other two.
All right. Well, guys, we have to leave it there. Charles, thanks for coming on. We'd love to have you back soon, talk more about this. Our guest has been Charles Murray. I'm here with Carl Cannon, Tom Bevan. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we'll be back with more right after these words. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And gentlemen, it is Friday. It's Halloween, which means it's time for...
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
Tom, what do you got?
I think it just occurred to me, I should dress up as John McEnroe for Halloween, put on the little headband and get the sort of curly afro thing going.
I'm not sure you're thin enough anymore.
I am left-handed though, so I got that going for me. All right. This week, this story's been out there. I'm sure many of our listeners have already heard about it, but it is just so ridiculous that I could not resist choosing this as my You Cannot Be Serious for this week. Glamour UK magazine, in their Women of the Year edition, put 9 men basically on the cover. These are men who had transitioned to being women, and it said, the subtitle was "The Dolls," and they're all wearing these shirts that say "Protect the Dolls." And J.K. Rowling, who's the best, and who is all over this, tweeted, "I grew up in an era when mainstream women's magazine told girls they needed to be thinner and prettier. Now mainstream women's magazines tell girls that men are better women than they are." That is the transgender movement is, in the opinion of many, an exceedingly misogynist movement. And this is just another example of that. So Glamour UK, you can't be serious.
It brought to mind the New York Dolls, which was David Johansen's band. Which, if you remember what New York was like in the late 70s, early 70s, go back, and those were real New York Dolls. Anyway, Carl, go ahead.
I had one earlier in the week, and it was, but I have two. Can I take two, Andy? It was such a week.
If they're quick, sure.
Representative Jim Himes, a Connecticut member of the House, a Democrat from Connecticut. He doesn't like the Trump bombing these Venezuelan votes. I don't either. I'm on record on saying I think it's horrifying. But I didn't say what he said. He said that when AOC is president, she'll start killing Republicans. The Republicans who support this should be careful. He's implying that I don't know if he mentioned Lindsey Graham, if he's on a sailboat down in South Carolina, President AOC would nuke him. It was the least serious thing I'd ever heard. But then, Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his podcast. He said that Christians who believe believe that Israel should have a country, that believe in the Jewish state, have a brain virus. Then that was followed up by J.D. Vance, who's asked a weird question by a college student who said that Jews are prosecuting Christians. He meant persecuting, one would assume. And instead of saying to the young man, "How did you get into college being so ignorant?" J.D. Vance sort of accepted the premise of the question, and basically said Donald Trump doesn't take orders from Benjamin Netanyahu. So Jim Himes, Tucker Carlson, JD Vance, you cannot be serious.
It's a threefer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
Wow.
good one.
Yeah.
Well, mine is New York Governor Kathy Hochul. She was attending this rally for Zoran Mamdani on Monday, and the crowd, a big crowd, was enthusiastically chanting, "Tax the rich." Mayor, this is a message she's apparently not quite ready to embrace, although she has endorsed the Democratic Socialist for mayor, who's likely to win on Tuesday. So when asked about this chant, she said, "I couldn't hear what they were chanting. I thought they were saying, 'Let's go Bills.'" I wasn't sure, but when you're up there, I heard some noise. I heard a lot of cheers. I know there's a passion for that. I went there as the leader of the Democratic Party, whose job it is to unify behind the Democratic nominee. I love the energy out there. So, Governor, when it comes to reading the crowd in New York City that is ready to vote for Mamdani, that was really magical thinking. You cannot be serious. But the Bills are 5-2, and they play the Chiefs this weekend.
It was Let's Go Brandon 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. So they may need a little help this weekend against the Chiefs. So let's go Bills. I'm for that.
Andy, if we have 30 more seconds, if we don't, we don't. But it reminds me of, it was in London. I was in Derry with President Clinton. I was covering him, and the crowd was chanting when Clinton came up on stage, "Bull, bull, bull." And Clinton got this alarmed look, and he thought they're saying bullshit, bull. And he turns to John Hume. He says, "Why are they saying that?" And John Hume says, "They're saying your name, Bill."
Ah, good one. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, that is our program for today. And just a reminder again, next week, Real Clear Politics is moving to the new Megyn Kelly channel. We're on at a new time. Easy to remember. We're going to be on channel 111 at 11 Eastern. So just remember, 111, 11 a.m., 5 days a week, starting next Tuesday, or Wednesday, rather, when we start. Channel launches on Tuesday. In the meantime, and in the future, we'll be on the podcast apps, YouTube, just like we are now. Where you find us, send us a comment, a like, subscribe, tell us what you think. From all of us at Real Clear Politics, we hope you have a wonderful Halloween. And until next time, we'll see you soon. Have a great weekend.